Welcome to Healthcare du Jour, where we dish up and digest the latest in healthcare. For the next 30 minutes, sit back as we bring you insight, commentary, and discussion on trending topics to the table, all expertly served up by our host and his guests. Now here's your host, Matt Fisher.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining as we dive into the hottest topics in healthcare. I'm your host, Matt Fisher. On the menu today is Vik Krishnan, President and CEO at Televox. Vik, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Vik, what I always like to do before getting into the main part of the conversation is give my guests a chance to provide more of an introduction in terms of who they are and what they do. So, Vik, the floor is yours.
Well, look, thank you for inviting me to chat. I appreciate the time we have together. So, as you mentioned, I'm Vik Krishnan, President and CEO of Televox. Televox is the largest patient relationship management SaaS platform in the country. We actually operate in 15 countries now. We've had a big expansion as of last year. But just quick background on myself. I've been running Televox for 4 years, but I've actually been in the industry more or less for about 2 decades. So years ago, I studied biomedical engineering. I got into the industry first in pharma and payer consulting. Later, I moved on to both Bain and the Boston Consulting Group, where I worked primarily on healthcare consulting, value creation projects, and so forth. Somewhere between all of that, I found the time to found another digital health company that focused on selling a very specific but valuable point solution to providers. And, we sold that in 2018. That's basically my history in a nutshell and how I found my way here. But look, my most important achievement is being happily married and having 3 kids. I've got boy-girl twins that are 8 and a son who's 3. So they keep me busy when I'm not working.
Yeah, no, that sounds like you are kept quite busy, and sounds like you're not even fully into sports age or outside activity ages yet.
Oh, we're getting there. We've got soccer, basketball, skating. It's with the 3 kids, they just can't have all the same interests.
Yeah, that is very true. So now I appreciate kind of that background you gave, but kind of as you said, you got into healthcare pretty quickly. So what was it that drew you in, and what has made you want to stay in healthcare?
Yeah, I always had an interest, but what really challenged that, or rather channeled that into the digital space, was a personal experience I had. So I had a surgery in 2005. I was a single man on my own living in New York, so not a lot of support, at least at home. There was a studio apartment. And I found the experience when I was discharged to be very disjointed. So, I was still a little loopy on the general anesthesia. I believe I was given instructions on a discharge sheet that I crumpled up and threw out, and I managed to stumble into a cab and go back to my apartment. But there were a lot of things I did not understand about what had happened to me and what my responsibilities were after having that procedure. Just one example, I didn't know the time, at which I needed to follow up with my surgeon or schedule an appointment with my PCP. I did not know that there was a piece of medical packing inside my body that was temporarily going to be there and would have to be removed later. And that if I moved or did something wrong, like that could actually injure me. I had to be aware of that. I didn't know these things. And I also got thinking, look, I'm a relatively young, healthy man. What is this experience like for, somebody who's older, maybe dealing with chronic illness, maybe doesn't have the means that I did at the time and was lucky enough to have. And I really felt like a lot of these problems could be addressed digitally. So I'd say that's what got me into it. I'd say what keeps me here. So let's fast forward that 2 decades. The last week, right, I was given a referral for a finger x-ray. And unfortunately, this health system has not adopted, the Televox solution for referral management. But I had to call their medical imaging department, wait for 20 minutes, and get told they didn't have my referral yet. I call back the next day, wait again, and then they tell me the times that they're free. So I show up on Saturday. They told me they were open then, and they said, wait, we don't do your procedure on Saturdays. That's a Monday thing. So, just think about the patient burden there. Think about the staff time eaten up and the inefficiency. The fact that I could have just simply gone elsewhere if I had chosen to, or just given up and not done the procedure at all. So these problems persist 2 decades later. It's why I'm here. It's why Televox is here, trying to solve these problems.
Yeah. So let's unpack what that means then. So if you're talking about kind of the unavailability or the lack of adoption of technology tools to help address these burdens, what does it look, or kind of what do those tools look like, or what does it look like with implementation, and kind of how do you frame even that broader problem or that broader category that's being addressed, that you're trying to address?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think let's start with problem, right? So, it's no secret that healthcare is years behind other industries like retail and banking in offering consumer-friendly experiences and self-service to their customers. In the case of healthcare, the customer is the patient. I think the reason that healthcare has been behind, is has a lot to do with the fact that there's just been a belief for years, and it is changing, but there's been a belief that patients were self-motivated enough to figure out these issues, basically show up and be prepared for their care. But I think three things are happening now. The disparity between healthcare and some of those other industries I mentioned is getting so wide that there's just really a recognition that something more can be done and needs to be done beyond, for example, just sending an appointment reminder and leaving everything else to phone calls. I think there's also a recognition now that it isn't fair. It isn't a fair expectation to put all of these, demands on the patient. And number three, this may be most critical, health systems and hospitals in particular are increasingly facing top line pressure, bottom line pressure, staffing challenges. And they're also recognizing that patients have choices. Certainly in the case of primary care today, there's a lot more places you can get that care than, just your health system. So there are choices. And, really, I think a lot of the enablers have been, the adoption of CCaaS, digitization of the system of record, the EHR, adopting a CRM. So these systems exist that have data, and they're really enabling now solutions like Televox to address these problems by hooking into those systems and really solving them with digital practical applications that meet the patient where they are and solve these core problems for providers.
Yeah, so when you're talking about meeting the patient where they are, do you mind just providing maybe some concrete examples of what that actually looks like in operation?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, by the way, let me just kind of also redefine, patient engagement versus patient relationship. I said that we are a patient relationship management platform. So I'll explain that. If you take patient messaging and patient engagement in one bucket, which is not what we do, I would characterize that as sending messages. So you send a message to the patient, you basically ask them to say yes, confirm, hit one, give you the response that you want. And if you don't, that patient basically has to either get a link to the portal, the EHR app, or a phone number to call. That is not the relationship. That is not the experience that Televox delivers. What Televox does is it creates an active channel. So we have a capability called Smart SMS, where a patient can continue to engage with their provider, but it's through Televox over SMS, and basically get an automated experience where they can manage their appointments. They can reschedule their appointments. They can get information on how to be prepared for their appointments. They can figure things out like, where do I go for my appointment? Just to give you a stat, the top 4 reasons why a patient calls their provider, jams up phone lines, and takes up that precious time that staff members have and could be using elsewhere is because a patient wants to cancel their appointment, reschedule their appointment. They don't know how to prep for their appointment. Or they don't know where their appointment is, what particular building at the health system. So that's one way we're solving this problem through Smart SMS. We're also solving it through the digital front door. So we're able to catch patients, when they're, basically of their own initiative, trying to reach out to their provider and give them automated solutions to their problems. So if it's not through SMS, we have an Iris web bot that can catch a patient, allow them to solve at least those 4 problems, if not many more that they may have. And if they do need to talk to a human staff member, we have agent chat solutions. So essentially, a patient can pivot to an agent chat experience. For them, it's, again, just typing on their phone or typing on the website. But a staff member at a provider is able to use Televox software and manage dozens of chats at the same time, instead of a one-on-one human phone call like the one I described a few minutes ago to the medical imaging department of my health system. That is inefficient. That does not really solve the problem for the patient, and is very burdensome for the provider. So I can go on with more examples, but those are just some of the examples of how we're using technology to meet the patient where they are, solve their problem, and in the end, make sure that the provider is actually benefiting, basically by having the patient prepared, ready to show up, and having more patients who actually show up to their provider.
And that definitely all makes sense. And, as you're describing it, what it really sounds like it breaks down to is, do you want like a binary black and white experience where it's, as you said, yes or no, or, option one or option two, as opposed to, a true interaction that you experience in everyday life for pretty much everything else that you could think of.
Everything else, every other industry is getting there, if not already there.
Yeah. So, as you said, so many other industries are there. So, what lessons do you think healthcare can learn to hopefully accelerate, more meaningful and impactful adoption and not go through maybe the same kind of growing pains that might have happened in other industries?
Well, I think one of the good news parts of the answer there is that there are vendors like Televox who have learned those lessons for our customers, right? So I think, some of the growing pains that other industries may have experienced would have been making sure that they have accurate data, accurate integrations, ability to actually self-serve problems to the consumer in ways that, adhere to their processes and their systems. And, healthcare at least has made a lot of innovation, a lot of advancement in terms of having a system of record, like I said, generally having a modern CCaaS, having a CRM, so those systems are there. And there are vendors like Televox who have learned how to integrate into those systems and deploy our capability at scale to solve these problems and deliver these experiences. So I'd say good news is the learning curve does not need to be as high. The pain of adoption is not as high as a healthcare provider, a health system may think, because these are things that we do every single day.
Yeah, and do you think there's also to some degree a kernel of truth of the fact that healthcare can also benefit from the fact that technology has progressed beyond the point where some of the other industries had started to adopt it? So it's while healthcare is definitely a late to the party in a regard, it's also not having to kind of wrestle with wanting the technology to catch up to what you actually want it to do.
Yeah, so there's definitely truth in that, right? So a lot of the metrics, we would track and report on, these things were being defined, 5, 10, 15 years ago in other industries like retail, right? But there's real proof that this type of technology delivers these outcomes. So you don't need to take a leap of faith. You simply just need to adopt it in healthcare. But let me give you an example of that, right? All of our technologies are proven, and we can report on this every month, to increase a customer's total patient volumes. And within those total patient volumes, to decrease the no-show rates, right? So does it take a provider a leap of faith to believe that our technology, when they see it, can do that? I would think not when they think about, what has this type of technology done for an airline, for a bank, for a telecom company. That learning has happened in other industries. So, point two, Televox's solutions and capabilities lower costs, plug holes in revenue leakage and alleviate the operational burden for staff. And one way we measure that is by the percentage of phone calls we can actually deflect by solving through automation or solving through agent chat, basically deflecting human-to-human phone calls. Would a provider need to take a leap of faith in believing that and knowing that it's been proven in those other industries I mentioned? I would think not, right? So, the technology is proven to do this. Applying it in healthcare is really where the opportunity is, at least for the healthcare industry. And then finally, if you talk to some CIOs, they'll actually tell you the number one metric for my health system that I believe drives performance for our health system is patient satisfaction. If I have a satisfied patient, they will engage more, they will adhere more, they'll stick with us and not go to the health system 10 miles down the road. Does it take a leap of faith to believe that this type of consumer-friendly, patient-friendly self-service capability and automation will delight patients? Again, on that, I would think not. That's been proven in other industries. So there's a lot of benefit here. So while I would say Televox makes this all easy, if I'm a decision maker at a health system and I'm not intimately familiar with Televox, I haven't deployed these capabilities yet, I would at least take comfort in knowing that what Televox or another similar vendor is telling me is believable because it has happened in these other verticals.
Yeah, and kind of to those points, as you said, with patient satisfaction being at least a spoken big driver of decisions, how specifically do you actually measure that? Are you collecting surveys or other information directly from the patients, or is it kind of intrinsic information that you might be able to glean from how the interactions are going, or is it some combination of those?
Yeah, so there are probably three things that we would use to measure that. One would be more operational, but I'll give you an example. when we're replacing a more basic solution, we see the engagement, the velocity, the speed of responses, the amount of patients that are responsive to the relationship platform that we offer to go up versus the response rate and the more basic messaging solution we may be displacing. So again, does that mean that the patient is happier? Well, I'll tell you points 2 and 3, but on point 1, certainly likely. They really are communicating in some way at a higher rate. The second thing that we do is, while we may not be the one who's sending out the patient satisfaction survey, we do sometimes. Our customers can certainly self-report to us after deploying Televox what their HCAP scores are, their CAP scores, HEDIS, these other types of things, and see the improvement there, right? So again, are we doing that measurement ourselves? To be honest, in most cases, no, but the customers generally understand that they've seen a movement on that after adopting Televox. One thing we do is we have a reputation management solution. So we can catch those patients that we believe have had a good experience and invite them to offer feedback on their provider. And when we've deployed that capability, we've seen positive feedback, scores on a 5-star scale, whatever you talk about, go up. So there's a fair amount of proof that patients are being delighted by these types of capabilities.
Yeah, no, and I think, as you said, that's a really important point, because it's, you actually want to be able to have that positive feedback loop to, reinforce what your expectations are, or even find maybe unexpected areas of benefit. And for those of you just joining, I'm talking with Vik Krishnan from Televox. We're talking about kind of patient relationship and the way that technology plays a role in it. And now I kind of want to go back to that phrase, that patient relationship management and the patient relationship. And I know you're talking about it being a broader, more interactive experience. So how do you see that relationship continuing to evolve, and what role can technology play in hopefully creating a richer, kind of deeper relationship with patients and their care teams?
Yeah, so technology and the deployment of it, like the capabilities we have, is key in evolving that relationship. So look, I'll tell you, I related earlier in our discussion a frustrating experience I had trying to engage with my provider. But once I was there, for my procedure, for my x-ray, personally, my experience has been that the care is great. So you've got great teams doing great jobs, and they simply cannot take on the manual burden of the relationship, certainly when a patient is outside the 4 walls of their, so to speak, hospital health system. So the digital component is key. If I just kind of outline again the 4 modules we offer: digital front door, appointment management, including care gap closure solutions, digital care programs, I'll talk about that in a moment, and patient marketing. To deploy these capabilities is really what allows digital to multiply, the efforts and, honestly, the well-intentioned on the part of the health system of the relationship. But let me go back to my personal experience back in 2005 about being discharged for a procedure. So I knew then, and I know now that, any discharge nurse, any care team, they care a lot about what happens to the patient when they're discharged. They just don't have the time to be calling and following up. So how do you use digital to augment, the well-intentioned, desires to see the patient do better? Our digital care program module, for example, can use logic, content in our libraries to tailor, personalization is important here too, to tailor a series of questions, answers, information that we're passing over the course of 30 days to a patient post-discharge to really make sure that they're doing well, and to really identify those patients that may be off track. You're discharged for congestive heart failure and you're reporting that your ankles are swollen, that's a problem, right? We can capture that digitally. What the care team can do to manage the relationship is use Televox software, track how patients are scoring, based on their responses and based on their engagements, and then they can decide. Those 7% of patients that are in red status and were discharged over the last month, I should call them. I should find a way to engage them, but at least I have the peace of mind of knowing that these other, 90 some odd percent are on track. So I would really want to hammer the point that it is digital and the adoption of it that ultimately can evolve the relationship further, really complete a more complete, that relationship picture, because there's no more manual capacity and staff capacity available, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that the point that you made about augmentation and alleviation of the manual component are two of the primary keys, because as you said, there is no more time for new or expanded manual processes. You really need to, I think, as you were saying, find ways to, I don't know if offloading is the best way to phrase it, but you need to find
I'd
ways
say
to,
I'd say augmenting.
yeah, but it all goes back to the fact of what you're trying to do is find ways to enable those teams to focus on what they really want to be and arguably should be doing, as opposed to being caught up in kind of those administrative tasks that divert attention and just become very time consuming and don't allow for them to focus on the high priority issues.
Yeah, I'll give you another really short example of this. So it's still very common when a patient is referred for a specialty procedure for there to be no automated outreach to actually inform the patient, hey, we picked up your referral. You can press this button and schedule it. Televox does that, but we're still deploying those capabilities in the industry. So think about a staff member in the department that sees that referral and has to make a phone call, possibly 2 or 3 phone calls to a patient, and they're just leaving voicemails, chasing that patient to bring them in. So yes, that staff member has an important job to do, but automation and digital will allow them to do it at scale, right? With the kind of capabilities we have. So not just augmentation, but do what they do, but do it at a scale that they cannot do it manually.
Yeah, and kind of that, as you said, kind of being able to do things at scale is reflective of what happens in other places or other industries, because there is such a, I think the volume that technology enables then kind of feeds into the need for the technology to help solve for that particular issue.
That's right. I would agree with that.
So, kind of if you're thinking about it from that perspective, where do you see the continued development going over the next couple of years? What do you think are some of the problems that are going to rise to the top and are going to kind of require immediate or kind of that short long-term attention to help avoid creating unnecessary tension
Sure.
in any of the relationships?
So here's what I think will happen. I think we will see the healthcare industry increasingly adopting the capabilities and the modules that I've described, the Televox offers, for example. I mean, I see that in our own customer base, so I do know that it's happening. But just to give you an example of that, without these capabilities, imagine a world where you as a patient have to be aware of and seek out a mammogram, cancer screening, an annual wellness visit. Like, I can't tell you actually, over the last 10 years, how many times anybody's ever reached out to me and said, hey, you should get an annual wellness visit through automation. But these are things we're now deploying now to enable our providers to do with automation, not just send the message, but allow a patient to schedule that. So we're going to see deployment of things that close care gaps because there's intelligence and analytics that can act on the system of record, reach out to the patient, and allow them to ultimately schedule a procedure. So we will see patients become healthier because they will get the care they need. That's, again, the definition of closing a care gap. And we will see providers benefit by doing that. So we'll see those types of capabilities deployed. We will see patients have lower rates of readmission and relapse for a condition that they just had treated because the care teams will use digital to augment and do at scale what they can't do manually through things like our digital care program module. We will see those things adopted. Patients will be healthier. They will have better outcomes. The whole system will benefit. Certainly the provider will benefit as well. We will see a reduction, and we're driving this in our own customer base, of human-to-human phone calls, and certainly inbound ones coming from patients around basic questions that can be solved through intelligence and automation and rich self-service capabilities with the kinds of things that we offer today. So again, maybe a long time coming to get here, and other industries got here faster. It's not, unusual for healthcare, but we will see those things happening now. I'm certainly seeing it in our customer base, and I think we'll see that more broadly in the industry over the coming years.
Yeah, and that all definitely makes sense because it's, as you said, it's really, kind of at the core, seems like it's about driving not just efficiency, but overall quality and improving outcomes, because you're enabling, you're almost kind of through the technology helping to remove the unintentional barriers to get to that place, because you're helping to take away the pain points where, whether you're talking about the patient side or the care team, clinician side, there's certain things where you just look at that task and you're like, no, I need to do it, but I just don't want to do it right now. And if you can make it seamless and pain-free, all of a sudden, I think as you're saying, you're going to start to see a lot of positives flow out of that.
So I do want to reemphasize to your point that this is a virtuous cycle where everybody wins. Through the adoption of this technology, the patients win as much as the providers win. Let's go back to my example that, earlier in our discussion, where I went in to have my medical imaging procedure done, and they just didn't offer it on that day, and that information wasn't made available to me. I'd like to think I'm a relatively intelligent man who asked the right questions, and I still didn't get the right information. But think about a different type of patient, somebody who doesn't have my means. They can't take that much time off of work. They work on weekends. They're paying for an Uber. They can't pay for it twice. Think about the outcome for that patient who doesn't have the time to come back in for that procedure. And maybe they don't get it, and they're underserved, and they develop a worse condition, right? So this isn't just having a provider be able to have an additional reimbursable interaction with a patient. This is about the patient doing better too in the short term and the long term. Everybody wins with the adoption of this technology.
Yeah, no, and those are, I think, important points to focus on as well, because it's, even if you unintentionally create that type of situation, you never know what that impact is going to be on someone's personal circumstances, or just even how and makes them feel about it. Because it could just be, they get so frustrated that they just throw their hands up in the air, and then it kind of creates that break or that disconnect that can take many years to repair. But Vik, believe it or not, we're already almost out of time. So I want to close with one final question, and ask you to break out a crystal ball, understanding that they're always very murky and hard to get a clear picture from. But what do you think will be the biggest shakeup in healthcare over the next year?
Well, first of all, I'll say I wish healthcare moved that fast. So let me answer over the next 2 to 3 years. I think that's more reasonable. So I define the difference between patient messaging and patient engagement and the patient relationship that we offer digitally. I think you're going to see some health systems say, for now, sending a basic message with, press 1 or 2, and then a link to, my EHR app or phone number. Some will do that and continue to do that and be okay with that. And others will be faster at adopting the capabilities that I've described that Televox offers. And I think what you will see over the next 2 to 3 years is it'll be an excellent A/B test on the divergence of the performance that those health systems have. The ones that are more digital first and understand that they need that vendor that has that automation and those capabilities will do better. Their top line performance will be better. Their bottom line will be better. They'll have fewer calls. They'll have happier staff, happier patients, and they will generally be winning. The ones that won't see the results that they want. And I think we'll see that over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think there'll be a lot of interesting data to be able to track and then interpret. But as I said, believe it or not, we are already out of time. I want to thank my guest, Vik Krishnan, for a great conversation today.
Well, and I want to thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone listening. Keep the dialogue going and connect with me to keep that dialogue open. I'm Matt Fisher. Until next time.